Hello, this is Jackie Cohen, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Monday, June 29th issue of the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Art of the Pardon. Days before granting him a pardon in March of last year, President Donald Trump phoned Trevor Milton, an electric vehicle entrepreneur and Republican donor who was convicted of defrauding investors of more than $660 million. The president, according to previously unreported details of the conversation reviewed by Reuters, told Milton that high-profile advisors convinced Trump that Milton had been unfairly prosecuted by the Justice Department of President Joe Biden. Among those who put in a good word, Trump said, was Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Milton's treatment was unjust, Trump said, and similar to his own targeting by federal investigators around the same time. You had a lot of support, Trump told Milton. Bobby Kennedy, you have to call Bobby and thank him. In an emailed statement, Milton didn't answer questions from Reuters about the exchange with the president or any support he received from Kennedy or others. The Department of Health and Human Services, where Kennedy is serving as secretary, didn't respond to requests for comment on this report. Trump's reference to Bobby is emblematic of how the president has upended the pardon process in his second administration, discarding over a century of protocol overseen by the Justice Department. Today, winning a pardon or other grant of presidential clemency routinely hinges upon an informal and highly personalized network of influencers and advocates appealing to Trump himself, according to a Reuters analysis of pardon, lobbying, and electoral records, as well as interviews with over 80 people familiar with clemency decisions during the president's current term. Pardon applicants once had to comply with long-standing DOJ guidelines, such as a 5-year wait after conviction or demonstrated remorse for their crimes. Reuters' analysis shows that under Trump, clemency now is far more dependent upon access to his inner circle. That access, Reuters found, is enhanced when an applicant can craft a narrative that resonates with the president's own sense of victimization, a sentiment he has regularly expressed since being indicted twice by federal prosecutors during his 4 years outside the White House. Reuters reviewed thousands of records to document a cast of characters involved in pardons or commutations granted by Trump since he returned to the presidency. Using public databases and artificial intelligence to help search, compile, and analyze the records, reporters identified many of the recipients, their advocates, and Trump administration insiders involved in clemency for more than 1,700 people since January 2025. The review found 96% of Trump's second-term clemency grants have gone to recipients who didn't fulfill long-standing DOJ guidelines for such requests. Past presidents on occasion have sidestepped those rules before, but fewer than 1% of those who received clemency during the Biden administration and just 14% of recipients in Trump's first presidency failed to meet the guidelines. Reuters identified 290 advocates or influencers who publicly or privately helped secure clemency for 197 recipients. Because some of the advocates worked on behalf of multiple candidates, their efforts at times overlapped, representing 624 different acts of influence. Among the influencers, 73 helped secure more than one pardon or sentence commutation. Brett Tolman, a former U.S. attorney now in private practice in Utah, has been involved in at least 12 pardons or commutations. Roger Stone, a veteran political consultant and longtime Trump confidant, had a hand in at least 5. Of the influencers identified by Reuters, at least 110 are known Trump allies. 11 of those received clemency themselves from Trump during his first term. High-profile advocates and pardon recipients include Stone and Angela Stanton King, a conservative author and campaign advisor to Kennedy before he ditched his 2024 run for the presidency and backed Trump. 6 people familiar with recent clemency acts said intermediaries with proven access to Trump's entourage can charge as much as $2 million for their services. Reuters, however, couldn't establish how much each advisor it identified had charged for help with a given pardon. Stone and Stanton King each acknowledged to Reuters their role in advocating for pardon recipients. Stone said he received no money for his services. Stanton King declined to say how much she was paid. Tolman, the Utah attorney, didn't respond to requests for comment. The constitutional authority to issue pardons and commutations rests solely with the president, Abigail Jackson, a White House spokesperson, wrote in a statement. The White House has a rigorous pardon review process, which includes the White House counsel, the Department of Justice, and ultimately the president. The statement didn't answer Reuters' questions about the president's call with Milton or the role of Kennedy or other specific administration officials in clemency decisions. In a separate statement, a DOJ spokesperson wrote that it plays a key role in assisting the president with exercising his constitutional authority. The department continues to make recommendations to the president that are consistent, unbiased, and uphold the rule of law. There has been no departure from this long-standing process. Trump's new pardon protocols and the privileged access that has come to define them has sparked coverage in the media and uproar among legal experts, traditionalists at the DOJ, and victims of some of the pardoned offenders. Even some of Trump's top aides, including Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, have pressed for a pause in clemency ahead of midterm elections, fearing further criticism could harm Republican chances, according to 3 people familiar with discussions over the matter. A White House official who declined to be identified disputed the assertion that Wiles has argued for a slowdown in pardons. The Reuters review is the first to measure the scale of the influencer network and identify the repeat roles that some of these advocates are playing. Because most of the advocacy isn't officially reported to government regulators, the news agency was unable to identify every single person involved in each act of clemency. Reuters was also unable to determine the total amount of money, including attorney or consulting fees, involved in securing these high-profile influencers. Insiders say the value they provide is clear. I have access, I have relationships. Stanton King, the author and former Kennedy advisor, told Reuters. Because of that, I'm in the perfect position to be able to advocate and make sure that someone's name or application isn't just sitting over somewhere in a pile getting dusty. In this new landscape, personal access to Trump or his confidants is more effective than traditional methods of wooing an administration. Reuters found only 2 successful pardon recipients who disclosed hiring registered lobbyists, a conventional path for courting influence, to work on their behalf, paying a combined $2.7 million. Another 26 people, lobbying records show, spent a total of nearly $1.9 million on lobbyists to no avail. In her statement, the White House spokesperson wrote that anyone spending money to lobby for pardons is foolishly wasting their money. Lobbyists must disclose in federal filings their persuasion efforts and what they do for the money. The hush-hush of informal influence is more difficult to track. One influencer, who asked not to be identified, has helped several clemency recipients through access to Trump's confidants. The tactic is a little bit like Game of Thrones. Who's in power, who's important, the person said. We'll say to a client, tell us anybody you know in the political world. It could be your best friend's cousin from elementary school. That influencer was one of several who told Reuters their advocacy has included outreach to Trump family members, including Donald Trump Jr., the president's eldest son. The person declined to elaborate on those contacts. In a statement, Andy Sarabian, a spokesperson for Trump Jr., said Don has not advocated for any pardons for anyone during his father's second term. Some pardon recipients and their advocates have gained favor by making political donations or with help from well-funded partisans or political organizations. Although criticized by some ethics experts as a possible quid pro quo, it's not a crime for a president to grant clemency to benefactors of their campaign or party unless an explicit agreement to sell forgiveness exists. According to Federal Election Commission records, 10 of the recipients, influencers, and companies they ran, including Milton, the EV entrepreneur, donated a total of more than $10 million to Trump-related political coffers, both before and after clemency decisions. Others, including a Florida man convicted of stealing fishing gear used to trap sharks for research, benefited when political interest groups espoused their causes. Compared with the past, there's nothing other than money, praise, partisanship, and relationships that dictates who gets pardons, said Ty Cobb, a White House counsel during the first Trump administration, who is now a private attorney in South Carolina. Create a story. The pardon power, meant to correct injustices and allow for mercy from outside the judicial system, is entrusted to the president by the U.S. Constitution. It is broad in reach. Presidents can pardon or forgive any federal criminal conviction. They can commute sentences to shorter terms. To formalize the process and minimize any corruption associated with it, the DOJ began overseeing pardon recommendations in the late 19th century. Most presidents since have followed the department's guidelines, but there have been exceptions. Bill Clinton, in 2001, notoriously pardoned Mark Rich, a billionaire commodities trader who fled the United States rather than face charges, including tax evasion, after Rich's associates made donations and advocated on his behalf. Joe Biden, just before leaving office, broke a public vow by pardoning his troubled son Hunter, who had recently been convicted on federal gun and tax charges. Both former presidents have defended their clemency actions. Starting his first day back in office, Trump outdid them all. He immediately granted clemency to the estimated 1,500 people who stormed the U.S. Capitol in 2021, none of whom would have qualified under DOJ guidelines. More than 200 other pardons and commutations have followed, including at least 2 pardons initiated by the White House before recipients had even sought one. Most of those subsequent recipients have employed what several people involved in the actions described as a hybrid process. The approach entails some combination of personal appeals, influential intermediaries, political donations, and a narrative of victimization by Biden-era prosecutors. It has enabled those who get the right access to leapfrog a line of other applicants. Liz Oyer, a former DOJ pardon attorney during the Biden administration and early in Trump's current term, calculates the current backlog at about 20,000 applications. Sam Mangle, a Florida clemency consultant, said he has worked on behalf of 10 successful recipients during this Trump term and is currently pressing for about 20 others. He described the process this way. Can you create a story that is similar to what members of this administration, including the president, have gone through? Then, can you somehow get it into the hands of the White House counsel? Mangle declined to name his clients, but he said he usually charges tens of thousands of dollars to advise them. Milton, founder of Nikola, faced a failed electric vehicle manufacturer based in Arizona, was convicted in October of 2022 of defrauding investors by promoting a business venture for products that didn't work. Among other evidence cited by federal prosecutors, he famously filmed a promotional video of a truck rolling down a hill, but gravity, not electricity, was propelling it. When Trump re-entered the White House, Milton was out on bail, appealing his conviction and 4-year prison sentence, and heavily courting the new president and his allies. In 2024, electoral records show Milton contributed at least $1.84 million to campaigns supporting Trump and Kennedy ahead of the presidential election. Reuters couldn't ascertain when or where Milton and Kennedy may have first crossed paths. But Trump, in his phone call to Milton in early 2025, made clear that Kennedy was a strong advocate. Trump also spoke fondly about his own personal meeting with Milton and his family at an undisclosed place and time before the pardon. According to previously unreported details of the conversation, Trump said, "You made a great impression. Your father, you, and your wife." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The president said he identified with Milton's plight. "When I met you, I said this man didn't do anything wrong," Trump told Milton. He disparaged the federal prosecutors on the case. "I heard the scum that was after you was the same scum that was after everybody." After being pardoned, Milton expressed little of the remorse traditionally required of recipients. According to the DOJ guidelines, a petitioner should be genuinely desirous of forgiveness rather than vindication. In a social media post the day of his pardon, Milton wrote that he was one of many Americans railroaded by the government. He added that trust and confidence in the Justice Department had eroded to nothing. In his statement to Reuters, Milton blamed a plot among the media, financial markets, and federal prosecutors to burn my company to the ground. He said he was targeted because of his long-standing support for Trump. He offered no substantiation of those claims. "They came after me, my family, and everything I had built because of it." That sense of grievance is widely voiced among the president's populist supporters. It's a through line for much of Trump's mercy, from the Capitol riot clemency to the pardons he granted shortly thereafter for 24 activists convicted of interfering with abortion clinics. Then there was the pardon last November for Troy Lake, a truck shop owner in Wyoming. Sentenced in 2024 to just over a year in prison, Lake pleaded guilty to altering emissions controls on at least 344 diesel trucks. The tampering was a violation of the Clean Air Act, an environmental law long derided by conservatives. Lake's sentence caused outcry among critics, including Cynthia Lummis, a Republican senator from Wyoming. Last year, citing Lake's case, Lummis sought to amend the act, arguing that Democrats and environmental regulators wage war on rural America. Meanwhile, two military veterans, friends of Lake's, petitioned Lee Zeldin, a retired Army Reserve lieutenant colonel and Trump's administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. "Please reach out to the president," they wrote in an August email reviewed by Reuters, "to request a pardon, clemency, or commutation." EPA spokespeople didn't respond to requests for comment. Holly Lake, Troy's wife, said Zeldin's intervention proved crucial. "That's when we started getting movement," she said in an interview. The movement included a phone call from Sean Hayes, a White House attorney, to discuss a pardon. Hayes is a central figure in any pardon process, according to several people familiar with the administration's clemency efforts. Reuters was unable to reach Hayes outside official White House channels for comment. In addition to discussing her husband's pardon, Holly Lake said Hayes asked the couple whether they knew of other cases in which defendants had been targeted by overzealous prosecutors. They have since advocated for others prosecuted on similar charges involving emissions devices. In January, the DOJ said it would stop prosecuting such cases. Lake, who served 7 months of a year-long sentence, told Reuters the president believes that regulatory agencies have gone too far. "They're going rogue," he said. In his second term, he really realized how much is wrong out there. Some politically influential organizations have worked to bring cases to the White House's attention. After Trump's November 2024 election, the Cato Institute and the Reason Foundation, liberation organizations dedicated to limiting the role of government, both highlighted the case of John R. Moore Jr., a Florida boater and diver. Moore was convicted in 2022 of stealing fishing gear used to catch sharks by a company licensed to do so for research. Moore and a colleague were fined and sentences to probation for theft in federal waters. After the two libertarian organizations published opinion pieces criticizing the convictions, Jim Jordan, a Republican congressman from Ohio and Trump ally, highlighted the case in a May 2025 hearing of the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. Also at the hearing were a Cato researcher and Tolman, the former U.S. attorney who has been involved in at least 12 pardons. Michael Fox, the Cato researcher, told Reuters that Tolman, while not a part of Moore's defense team, helped draw attention to the case. "I had no idea that anyone was working on my behalf," Moore said in a telephone interview. "I'm still surprised that my case resonated." After the hearing, Hayes, the White House counsel, called Mark Seidels, Moore's attorney, to discuss a pardon that Trump ultimately announced weeks later. "I was shocked," Seidels said in an interview, noting he hadn't even requested a pardon yet. He asked, "Can you tell us the facts and circumstances of the case?" And of course I took full advantage of that. As with Lake, the Wyoming truck mechanic, Seidels and Hayes asked if he knew of other cases of prosecutorial excess. Seidels said he has since made recommendations for others. Put a kind word in. Among the most effective advocates, Reuters review shows, are Trump associates who themselves have received clemency. The official the White House has dubbed its pardon czar, responsible for organizing clemency efforts, is Alice Marie Johnson. She was pardoned by Trump during his first term after serving more than 2 decades in prison on a conviction related to cocaine conspiracy and money laundering. When Trump announced her appointment last year, he described her as an inspiration and told her to find people just like you, perceived to have been victimized by the courts. Another top advocate is Stone, the political consultant. At the end of his first administration, Trump pardoned Stone, who had been convicted in 2019 for obstructing a congressional investigation regarding the 2016 presidential election. Stone's connections have proven valuable for clemency seekers. Not only does he enjoy access to the White House, Stone also hosts a radio show on prominent conservative broadcasters, where he has championed some of the recipients' causes. In a text message exchange, Stone said he is motivated by justice, not remuneration. "I have not received a single penny," he told Reuters. "I was moved by either prosecutorial overreach or misconduct, judicial bias, or political weaponization." Reuters was unable to confirm his assertion. Absent from Trump's clemency, 3 others who cooperated with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and pleaded guilty to paying Jenkins and the bribes. Stone, by text message, said he didn't speak up for the others because he found their testimony flawed and characteristic of the politically motivated trial. In one case, prominent connections enabled a longtime Democratic operative to receive clemency. Carlos Watson and OZ Media, his California-based media company, along with co-conspirators, were found in 2024 to have defrauded investors of more than $60 million by lying about business deals with Google and Oprah Winfrey. Watson, who is African American, argued at his sentencing that prosecutors unfairly targeted him because of his race, that his conviction was a modern lynching. Fatal crash renews inner loop safety focus. City weighs expressway replacement proposal. A fatal wrong-way crash on Rochester's inner loop early June 26 has renewed questions about the future of a road that city leaders are planning to transform. 2 people were killed when a vehicle traveling the wrong way on the highway collided with another car around 1:26 a.m., according to New York State Police. While investigators continue to examine the circumstances of the crash, the collision has also renewed attention on Rochester's inner loop itself, a roadway that has been the subject of years of debate over safety, neighborhood impacts, and its role in the city. The city plans to replace the northern segment of the expressway with a street grid, part of a long-term effort to reconnect neighborhoods that were divided when the highway was built. For years, city officials, planners, and neighborhood advocates have debated the future of the inner loop, citing its effects on surrounding neighborhoods and questions about how the highway functions within the city. Construction of the inner loop first began in 1952. The highway was intended to solve traffic issues and make commuting more efficient. Over the 13 years it took to construct, there were many homes, offices, parks, and churches, mostly in black communities, that were destroyed to accommodate the growing number of cars in the city. Opinions over the inner loop have shifted over the years since its construction. In 2017, Rochester celebrated the removal of the inner loop's eastern section. Then, in 2021, the inner loop's northern section was ranked by the Congress for the new urbanism as one of the worst highways in America. Nearby neighbor reflects on the Rochester inner loop. Inez Burns lives in Rochester's Market View Heights neighborhood, about half a mile north of the inner loop. Burns said that the inner loop has not been adequately maintained and has felt unsafe for years. It never looks nice and there's always trash. There are also many potholes, Burns said. There's no reason why it should be there. It's very unsafe. The City of Rochester plans to replace the northern segment of the Inner Loop Expressway with a city street grid. The goal of the project is to replace the remainder of the Inner Loop Expressway with new, safer city streets, green space, bike lanes, equitable redevelopment, and reconnecting communities. Construction on the Inner Loop North is estimated to begin in 2028. What happened in the Inner Loop fatal crash? According to the New York State Police, a wrong-way driver was involved in the multi-car crash. The report determined that a 39-year-old female was driving a 2024 Honda CR-V, traveling westbound in the eastbound lanes of the Inner Loop against the flow of traffic. The Honda collided head-on with a 21-year-old male driving eastbound in a 2012 Ford Fusion with a 21-year-old male passenger. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. Following the head-on collision, the Ford Fusion entered the path of Martin T. Harmon, 29, who was driving a 2012 Jeep Liberty, resulting in a secondary collision. Harmon was transported to Strong Memorial Hospital for treatment of non-life-threatening injuries. Ontario County bucks regional poverty trend, report finds. Recently released data as part of a study concerning the working poor in the Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes region indicates a good news, bad news state of affairs. Mostly the latter, although there is a bright spot and possible way forward. On one hand, roughly 1 in 3 households throughout the 6-county region cannot afford necessities such as housing, food, childcare, and transportation, even while working. On the other hand, Ontario County bucked the trend, showing a meaningful reduction in the number of financially struggling households, even as its population grew, which is significant, according to Jamie Saunders, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes. In praising Ontario County government, nonprofits, and employers at a press conference June 25th, Saunders said this movement does not come by accident. County and community leaders leaned into honest discussions about poverty and changing how this community talks and responds to financial hardship rather than look away. The data suggests that willingness created conditions that led to progress, Saunders said. You can't fix what you are not willing to face, Saunders said. What is ALICE? The acronym ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. So-called ALICE households earn just over the federal poverty line of $33,000 for a family of 4 and $15,960 for an individual, but still cannot make ends meet. If a family makes $33,100 a year, they're not counted as living in poverty, but they are still struggling, Saunders said. A report published through United for ALICE, a national partnership of local United Way organizations, is meant to give a ground-level, honest look at how working families are faring, Saunders said. The data shows across the country, New York and Finger Lakes region, including Ontario County, what many already suspect. Families are under real pressure, Saunders said. Ontario County Administrator Chris DeBolt said county leadership and the Board of Supervisors believe strongly in what this data shows. What did Ontario County do about poverty? The county continually directs investment in workforce development and relies on a network of dedicated nonprofits that help families obtain those necessities. The county also used a portion of its more than $4.3 million in Federal American Rescue Plan Act funding, a program meant to help in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, to bring the Alice at Work program to 19 local employers, such as UR Medicine Thompson Health, the county's largest employer. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Alice at Work is an empathetic program designed to help employers rethink poverty and support employees who are struggling financially by focusing on ways to create more equitable, supportive, and productive workplaces. That could lead to changes in pay or work schedules, for example. Ontario County is the first in the region to sign on, and it's now in its second year. It gives us the ability as a community to have a different conversation about what poverty looks like, what poverty means, and more importantly, what poverty feels like, DeBolt said. Here's what the numbers show since it was introduced. Alice households in the county fell from 14,097 to 13,121. A drop of 976. Households in poverty fell from 4,875 to 4,542. DeBolt said gaps simply cannot be filled alone and praised staff members and leadership from the Board of Supervisors, as well as the United Way and a network of dedicated nonprofit partners for their efforts in attempting to do so. I think that's really the story, that it takes a community to try to move things forward in a positive direction, DeBolt said. Bringing Alice into the workplace. Michael F. Stapleton, Jr., President and CEO of UR Medicine Thompson Health, was presented poverty data early on, which showed him and the health system's executive team that while Canandaigua is known as the chosen spot, it's the chosen spot for a chosen few. There are a lot of people in our community who are in great need, Stapleton said. We took this data to heart. For example, that led to programs that allow employees to work and go to school part-time to advance their careers, with a stipend helping with salary and tuition. Calling it wildly successful, Stapleton said, we want to keep bringing those opportunities forward. In all, 19 organizations took part, ranging from banks and financial services companies to nonprofits to educational institutions such as Hobart and William Smith Colleges in Geneva. It's a start. The need to address poverty continues. While the Ontario County numbers are worth celebrating, Saunders said, families in the other counties in the region showed increases in poverty and families continuing to lose ground. Even in Ontario County, some 12,000 households remain at the Alice level or in poverty. The need out there in the community is significant, DeBolt said. The issue is complex and ever-changing, and the situations are precarious for families across the region, Saunders said. Continued advocacy, education, and partnerships are necessary. No county, no community has solved this, Saunders said. Low turnout for high-stakes New York primaries. It was a marathon primary race in one of the country's most targeted congressional districts, culminating in a resounding victory for Kate Conley as the Democratic nominee to take on Republican Representative Mike Lawler. Yet after more than a year of campaigning, countless candidate forums, and several $1 million of donations raised and spent, turnout in the June 23rd election in New York's 17th district was a modest 22%. Just over 1 in 5 registered Democrats had taken the trouble to vote in the 5-way race. That may sound low for a race that's already in the national spotlight as a crucial battleground district in midterm elections this fall. But it was fairly typical turnout for primaries, which tend to bring out the most politically engaged voters and fall off the radar for many others. I'm disappointed that more voters didn't turn out, said Westchester County Democratic Chairwoman Suzanne Berger, one of 4 Democratic county leaders in the 17th district. But it's not unusual to have turnout of 25% or less in Democratic primaries. Media coverage has locked on 3 New York City congressional races that were won by left-wing candidates backed by the city's Democratic Socialist mayor, Zohran Mamdani. But for all the post-election hoopla about the continued strength of his movement, 2 of those races had slightly lower turnout than New York's 17th district. It was 20% in the 13th district, where 31-year-old Daria Liza Avila Chevalier scored a stunning upset over 5-term Representative Adriano Espaillat, the leader of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And it was around 21% in the Brooklyn-Queens district, where Claire Valdez, a fellow Democratic socialist, thumped the party's establishment's choice by 20 points. Turnout was better in 2 House races in more affluent parts of the city. It was 26% in the 12th district, where Mamdani-backed Brad Lander crushed Representative Dan Goldman, and in the Manhattan district, where Michael Lasher won a crowded race to succeed Representative Jerry Nadler, turnout was more than 31%, the highest showing of voters in all of New York that day. Elsewhere in New York, turnout was 22% in a Republican primary won by Anthony Constantino to replace exiting Representative Elise Stefanik in the 21st District, a vast swath of northeastern New York. And just 19% of Democrats turned out for a Rochester area 25th District primary in which Representative Joe Morelli easily fended off a pair of challengers. Why trees disappeared near the Irondequoit Bay beacons. The removal of trees and greenery near the Irondequoit Bay light beacons was part of routine maintenance on federal navigation structures and came after complaints about poison ivy and poison oak near the path, according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. First reported by WROC-TV, the removal of trees and shrubbery caught some residents off guard, but the vegetation was found along federal navigation structures at Irondequoit Bay, the West Breakwater and East Jetty, and Oak Orchard Harbor in Orleans County. The removal is part of routine operations and maintenance, the Army Corps of Engineers said in a statement. The work protects the underlying stone structure and improves the ability to inspect and access their condition. The work came, in part, from a request from Monroe County in September to clear the vegetation, the Corps said. The county had received complaints about poison ivy and poison oak near the walkways at Irondequoit Harbor. With the Corps already planning vegetation clearing in Oak Orchard Harbor at the request of Orleans County, the projects were combined. Work began on June 4th, with work complete at Irondequoit Harbor by June 18th, and another day of work slated for Oak Orchard. The projects cost $40,000, with $25,000 in Irondequoit and $15,000 in Oak Orchard, and was done by DeMiles Inc. of Niagara Falls. The work was completed in coordination with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and incorporated input from local officials. The structures cleared are designed to protect the harbors and ensure safe passage for boaters, charter fishing, and the U.S. Coast Guard. The marinas in Irondequoit produced more than $10.2 million in revenue in 2019. The figure is $7 million at Oak Orchard. Longtime radio host signs off after more than 20 years. Jeremy Newman, a presence on Rochester radio for more than 2 decades, has hosted his final show here. In a June 24th Facebook post, he wrote, "A few weeks ago, I told iHeart I was moving back to Texas when my contract expired in October. They just called and moved up my last day. It's today. What a blessing to get a severance while I pack and sell the house. So after 22 years, I'm leaving rock. Thanks for everything. It's been a good run. Now I'm finally reuniting with my family and roots. Again, thanks to everyone that made my stay here such a gift." Today, iHeartMedia announced staff cuts as part of the restructuring, but in a phone call with the Democrat Chronicle, Newman reiterated that he planned to leave in the fall, and in previous Facebook posts, he had hinted at a return to his home state. Look, almost everything I have and who I am has been shaped directly or indirectly by people who have supported me over the last 22 years, and I'm just wildly appreciative and flattered by it, he said. Jeremy Newman's Rochester Beginnings. Newman made his Rochester radio debut on June 4, 2004. His first shift was the 7 p.m. slot on country station WBEE-FM 92.5, long a local radio ratings champ owned by Odyssey. In 2019, he reminisced on Facebook about driving here from Texas in a U-Haul, towing a wrecked 1996 Chevrolet Blazer with no heater to work evenings. I spent my first night at the Microtel on Lehigh Station Road, Henrietta, he wrote. I was scared to death personally and professionally. 15 years later, I realize how blessed I am to still be here. Stability in radio is rare with us transplants. His original plan was to be here only short term. He thought he would have to keep moving to build a career. But 6 months led to a year, and then 2 years, and now it's been 22, he told the Democrat Chronicle. Newman went on to co-host the B Morning Coffee Club from 5:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. with Terry Clifford, who retired in September 2023. For years, it was the #1 morning radio show in this market, and despite host changes, it remains the top local morning radio show. The most recent Nielsen ratings put WDKX FM 103.9 at #1 with the syndicated Steve Harvey Morning Show. Newman exited WBEE in March 2020 after a heated on-air exchange with a listener. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life was the manner in which I left my old job at WBEE, he said. I was angry and very immature. I didn't want to be there, but the manner in which I left was humiliating. I could have been a little more mature and maybe left the way I have with iHeart. They gave me an opportunity when nobody else would, and I'm thankful for that. I wanted to do right by them because they did right by me. That opportunity was hosting an evening show and later a daytime show on iHeart station WDVI-FM 100.5 after it changed formats from adult contemporary to country. Through September 2025, Newman also co-hosted a midday show on WAIO 95.1 FM with Wham AM 1180 personality Bob Lonsberry called The Long Lunch with Newman and Lonsberry. Both stations are owned by iHeart. Future plans in Texas. An outdoorsman all of his life, Newman said he's looking forward to a quieter existence in Texas, either in Houston or deep East Texas, and doing work that's not public-facing, he said. I used to love the attention. I was always a ham, but something changed in my late 30s, and I became really uncomfortable with it. I became a little more sensitive to the negativity, which comes along with it. I didn't receive as much as other people do, not even close, but the love affair just waned. However, he looks back on his time here with nothing but gratitude. In a million years, I never thought I would have a career in radio, he said. I wanted it, and for whatever reason, I was embraced here, especially coming from out of the area. Even when I was younger, I knew there was something special here for me from listeners. He is also grateful to his former colleagues. I've worked with some great people along the way, he said. A lot of what I am is due to my former coworkers as much as listeners. I've been surrounded by good people, talented people almost every step of the way. My time here has exceeded any expectation I ever had. Last day for longtime TV meteorologist. Channel 10 meteorologist Glenn Johnson has also signed off the air for good. Johnson, who joined WHEC-TV, Channel 10, in July 2021, announced earlier this month that he planned to step back from television after 41 years. Raised on Long Island, he originally dreamed of playing for the New York Yankees before pursuing meteorology. He began his television career at Channel 13 in 1985 as an intern while attending SUNY Brockport. He later became a part-time meteorologist and eventually moved into weekend and weekday morning forecasting roles. In 2001, he was named chief meteorologist at the station, succeeding his mentor, Bill Peterson, who died in 2006. Johnson spent 36 years at the ABC affiliate before being laid off in May 2021. Weeks later, he joined WHEC, an NBC affiliate. He said retirement will allow him to spend more time with his wife Eileen and their 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. Nothing like Papa and Grandma time, he said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Ringleader of Nordquist murder pleads guilty. Guttural sobs filled an Ontario County courtroom on June 26 as Precious Arzwaga admitted to torturing, sexually assaulting, kidnapping, and murdering 24-year-old Sam Nordquist in 2025. Arzwaga, 40, is one of the 7 defendants charged in connection with Sam's death, pleaded guilty to all 10 charges she faced in front of Ontario County Judge Christina Carl, with the understanding that she will serve life in prison without parole. Linda Nordquist, Sam's mother, and Kayla Nordquist, his sister, made the 17-hour drive from Minnesota to watch Arzwaga admit to her crimes. Kayla's cries could be heard throughout the courtroom as Arzwaga, who prosecutors have referred to as the ringleader, made her guilty pleas to each charge. I don't know why she all of a sudden feels guilty, Kayla said outside of the courthouse. She wasn't guilty when she was raping him and beating him and starving him. She didn't feel guilty then. Arzwaga will return to court on September 4th for her sentencing hearing, but the legal proceedings for her may not end there. In court, Carl put on the record that there is a federal investigation into Arzwaga's actions. Ontario County District Attorney Jason McBride would not say when or if federal charges would be filed, or even what those charges potentially could be. But he said he believes there will be continued conversations with the federal attorneys. Arzwaga is now the 2nd defendant to plead guilty in connection with Sam's death, as Emily Matoika, 20, pleaded guilty to 2nd-degree murder and 2nd-degree kidnapping earlier this month. Arzwaga pled guilty to all 10 charges related to Nordquist's death: 1st-degree murder, 2 counts of 1st-degree kidnapping, 1st-degree aggravated sexual abuse, 2 counts of 1st-degree coercion, concealment of a human corpse, 2nd-degree conspiracy, and 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. What happened to Sam Nordquist? Prosecutors and Sam's family allege that he met Arzwaga on TikTok in the summer of 2024. The two started a romantic relationship, and Sam ended up flying from Minnesota to the Canandaigua area to stay with Arzwaga for what his family thought was supposed to be a 2-week vacation. After the 2 weeks, Sam never got on his return flight home. He decided to stay with Arzwaga in room 22 at Patty's Lodge in Hopewell, Ontario County, where she was living with her 2 young children. Prosecutors allege that between January 1st and February 1st, 2025, Arzwaga, Kyle Sage, Patrick Goodwin, Jennifer Quijano, Emily Matoika, Kimberly Sochia, and Thomas Eves brutally tortured Sam to death before disposing of his body in a field in Yates County. First Assistant District Attorney James Nobles questioned Arzwaga on each of the charges. With tears in her eyes, Arzwaga admitted to forcefully restraining Sam, along with the other defendants, by blocking him in with chairs and duct taping his hands so that he couldn't leave room 22. Linda, who tried to stay composed throughout the hearing, sobbed as the prosecutor described what Arzwaga and the other defendants did to her son. Arzwaga admitted to kicking, punching, and sexually assaulting Sam with the handle of a broomstick over a prolonged period of time, which resulted in his death. She was the only defendant to be charged with the 2 counts of coercion. These charges, she admitted on Friday, resulted from coercing her 2 young children into participating and watching the torture Sam endured. Nordquist's family reacts to plea. Outside of the courthouse, Kayla became hysterical, collapsing into the arms of community members who were there to support the Nordquist family. "Oh, my poor brother," Kayla said through her tears. "He was just a baby. 24 years old is too young to die and is too young to be murdered and tortured to death." Kayla described her brother as a good person, full of love and laughter, and someone who trusted easily. She believes Arzuaga took advantage of Sam's kindness. She manipulated him, she lured him, and I think she wanted to kill him from the day she met him, she said. Linda, Sam's mother, explained how hard it is to grapple with the public knowing the gruesome details of what happened to her son. After seeing Arzuaga in person for the first time at court, Linda said she doesn't believe her tears or that she is remorseful. She doesn't see Arzuaga's guilty plea as justice for Sam. Sam's still not here, Linda said. Sam will never have another birthday, another holiday, another family vacation. Won't get married ever, won't have children ever. He's gone. 24. Linda said she wants the world to remember Sam as the loving, caring, and jokester person that he was. Her favorite memory with him, she said, was driving around the lake together, looking at the rich houses and fantasizing about them. There are times she still thinks he is going to walk through her door before the harsh reality of her loss sets in, she explained. Linda's son is gone, but she carries the last words he said to her everywhere she goes, memorialized in a tattoo on her shoulder. I love you, and I'll call you tomorrow. What happens next? Arzuaga will await her sentencing hearing, scheduled for September 4th at the Monroe County Jail. McBride said during that hearing, Sam's family, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, and even Arzuaga herself will get the chance to speak in front of Judge Carl. The judge will then impose the maximum sentence, life in prison with no chance of parole. Arzuaga will later be transferred to the state prison. Is this sentence ever going to bring him back? Does it undo the terrible things she did to him? Absolutely not, McBride said, but I think the community should feel reassured that this individual won't do this again, and she can't do this to anyone else. The 5 other defendants are still pleading not guilty as of now. Their trials are scheduled for 2027. McBride said he couldn't speak to how or if Arzuaga's plea would impact the others' decisions in pleading. Arzuaga's federal investigation. Not much is known about the details of Arzuaga's federal investigation at this time. Her lawyer, William Swift, said he could not speak to it as he is only representing her on the state level. Many crimes could result in federal charges. Those like bank robberies, narcotic-involved crimes, fraudulent activity that impacts interstate commerce, and so on. The United States Department of Justice website explains that in cases where the crimes may violate both federal and state laws, the local U.S. Attorney's Office will work with local and state law enforcement to see if federal charges should be brought. The U.S. Attorney's Office has not yet filed any charges against Arzuaga, so it is not clear what federal crimes, if any, she committed. Sam's mother said that if federal charges are brought, she doesn't want Arzuaga to get the death penalty. It is an easy way out, Linda explained. She said she wants Arzuaga to suffer the same way her son had to. Buttigieg, children, targeted in Michigan swatting incident. Pete Buttigieg's life was upended by a hoax. An anonymous caller told Michigan Children's Protective Services that his 4-year-old twins were in danger. We could not understand someone abusing the system like this in order to hurt me and my family with an absurd and easily refuted allegation of a horrific crime, the former U.S. Transportation Secretary and Democratic presidential candidate wrote in a June 26 Substack post. Buttigieg's post said that earlier in the week, a police officer and a children's services worker showed up on the doorstep of his Michigan home. They said they were investigating an allegation made against him, Buttigieg wrote in the post, but they would not share any details until the kids underwent private forensic interviews scheduled for the following day. The 24 hours until they returned are among the darkest hours of my life, Buttigieg wrote. This is the ugliest thing that has happened to me since my career in service began. After the kids' interview, Buttigieg and his husband, Chasten Buttigieg, learned the nature of the allegation. An anonymous caller claimed to have spoken with a woman who met Buttigieg at a conference in Alabama several years ago. That woman, the caller said, claimed Buttigieg confessed unspeakable violent crimes to her. Buttigieg wrote that he had told the police officer that he had never been to the town in Alabama where he was alleged to have spoken to the woman. Then the officer made clear that he believed this was politically motivated and said it would not be referred to a prosecutor, Buttigieg wrote. Nothing in the forensic interview with the children, which was conducted by trained personnel, had led to concerns. The Michigan State Police issued a statement about the incident, saying it had received an anonymous report. The Michigan State Police and Child Protective Services responded and determined the report was false, the statement said. False reports are dangerous and divert law enforcement officers and child protective services workers from responding to legitimate emergencies and protecting vulnerable children and families. The CPS allegation against Buttigieg comes at a time of heightened concerns of political violence in recent months. Buttigieg said his family remains deeply shaken after the incident. Even though the accusation was absurdly and obviously false and was promptly rejected by law enforcement, I still worry about the harm it has done, Buttigieg wrote. Whatever you think about someone in politics, you leave people's kids out of it. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Monday, June 29th issue of the Democrat and Chronicle. Your reader has been Jackie Cohen. Thank you for listening.